The week that changed everything. She had learned long ago how to become invisible. In places like this, five-star hotels wrapped in marble, gold accents and unspoken rules, being invisible was not just survival, it was expected. The wealthy did not want to see the hands that cleaned their rooms or the eyes that noticed their carelessness. They wanted silence, efficiency, obedience. And she gave them exactly that. Every morning before sunrise, she tied her hair back tightly, slipped into her plain uniform, and reminded herself of the same rule she had lived by since she was a child. Don't take up space and no one will push you out. She moved through the corridors with a cart that squeaked softly, head slightly bowed, footsteps quiet against the carpet. Guests passed her without acknowledgement, sometimes brushing past her shoulder without apology. She never complained. Complaints belonged to people who were seen. That morning felt no different, until the moment everything changed. The elevator doors opened on the 7th floor, and he stepped out as if the world adjusted itself to accommodate him. He was tall, impeccably dressed, the kind of man whose presence bent attention without effort. His suit was tailored to perfection, his posture confident, his expression controlled. Power radiated from him, not loud or arrogant but absolute. The kind of power that came from never being questioned. She collided with him by accident. Her cart bumped lightly against his side as she turned a corner too quickly. The impact was small, almost nothing, but it shattered the rhythm of her day. "I'm sorry," she said immediately, her voice soft, eyes lowered. She expected irritation. Maybe dismissal. Maybe nothing at all. Instead, silence fell. She felt it before she saw it, the weight of his attention, steady and unhurried. When she finally looked up, her breath caught. His eyes were fixed on her, not in the way guests sometimes looked at her body or uniform, but as if he were trying to understand something that didn't fit into his world. There was curiosity there. And something deeper. Something unsettled. "It's fine," he said, his voice lower than she expected. "Come." Almost gentle. She nodded quickly and moved past him, heart pounding in her chest for reasons she didn't understand. She told herself it meant nothing. A stranger. A rich man passing through. A moment that would disappear as quickly as it came. But that night, as she cleaned the last room on her list, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. He had not planned for her. His life was built on schedules, negotiations, expectations that had existed long before he was old enough to consent to them. Every step he took had been calculated for him: education, career, marriage. Even love, if it could be called that, had been arranged like a business merger. And yet, a single look from a woman in a hotel uniform had unraveled him more than any financial crisis ever had. He sat alone in his suite that night, untouched drink on the desk, documents unopened. His mind replayed the moment again and again. The quiet apology, the way her eyes held sadness that didn't belong to someone so young, the way she had moved through the hallway like she expected to be ignored. People rarely ignored him. But he had ignored people like her his entire life. That realization sat heavy in his chest. The next day their paths crossed again. Then again. Always by chance. Always brief. Always charged with something neither of them acknowledged aloud. He began timing his mornings without realizing it. She found herself smoothing her hair in the staff mirror before stepping onto the 7th floor, embarrassed by her own behavior. They spoke only when necessary. Polite words. Professional distance. But something unspoken grew between them. On the 3rd day the elevator stopped between floors. The lights flickered once before settling into a dull glow. Silence pressed in around them, thick and inescapable. She stood stiffly near the wall, hands folded in front of her. He noticed how she breathed shallowly, how her shoulders tensed. "Are you afraid of enclosed spaces?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "No. I'm just not used to standing this close to people like you." The words slipped out before she could stop them. "People like you." He didn't flinch, didn't correct her. Instead he smiled faintly, sadly. "I'm just a man," he said. "Under the suit." She glanced up, surprised. "I don't believe that," she said honestly. The elevator jolted back to life moments later, breaking the spell. When the doors opened, she stepped out quickly, heart racing, afraid of what might happen if she stayed 1 second longer. Behind her, he watched her go with the unsettling certainty that something irreversible had begun. Dinner was a mistake. He knew it the moment the question left his mouth. "Have dinner with me," he said quietly, standing too close, his voice stripped of command and filled instead with something dangerously human. She hesitated. She saw the ring on his finger. She knew who he was. Everyone did. A billionaire heir. A man promised to another woman whose face smiled from magazine covers. I can't, she said even as her voice trembled. I don't belong in your world. He met her gaze. Then meet me somewhere that belongs to neither of us. That was how the week began. A restaurant far from cameras. Walks through neighborhoods he had never noticed before. Conversations that stretched for hours because neither of them wanted to return to their separate realities. She told him about growing up without parents, about learning early that survival meant silence, about dreams she had packed away because dreaming was expensive. He listened as if every word mattered. He told her about inheriting a life he never chose, about carrying responsibility like a chain disguised as privilege, about loneliness that money could not soften. By the fourth night, restraint had become painful. By the fifth, it was impossible. In a small apartment he kept hidden from his public life, they crossed the line they both pretended not to see approaching. The kiss was tentative at first, almost reverent, before it became desperate, as if they were trying to make up for years of absence in each other's lives. For one intense week the world stopped. He was not the billionaire. She was not the invisible worker. They were simply two people choosing each other in stolen hours. But reality does not disappear just because we ignore it. On the final morning, as sunlight crept through the window, she lay against his chest listening to his heartbeat. She wanted to believe the promises whispered into her hair, that he would find a way, that he would choose differently, that this was not just an escape. Trust me, he said, holding her close. I won't disappear. She wanted to trust him. She really did. But deep inside, something old and wounded whispered a warning she had learned too well. People with power leave. People like her are left behind. When he left that morning for what he called urgent business, she stood by the window watching his car disappear down the street. She did not know it then, but that was the last moment of peace she would have for years. Because silence was coming. And silence would change everything. When silence became betrayal. Silence does not arrive loudly. It seeps in slowly, disguising itself as patience, then confusion, then dread. On the first day she told herself he was busy. Powerful men were always busy. Meetings ran late. Flights were delayed. Decisions worth millions did not pause for emotions. She checked her phone anyway. No message. On the second day she began to worry. Not because she doubted his feelings, but because doubt had always been her shadow. She replayed every conversation in her mind, searching for the moment she might have said too much, asked for too much, hoped for too much. She sent a short message. Simple. Careful. Are you okay? It never showed as delivered. On the third day fear took shape. She called his office. A polite assistant answered with professional efficiency. When she asked for him by name the tone shifted, cooler, guarded. I'm sorry, the woman said. Mr. ___ is unavailable. He does not take personal calls. I just need to leave a message, she replied, forcing calm into her voice. There was a pause. I'm instructed not to forward messages from hotel staff. Hotel staff. The words landed like a slap. She hung up without saying goodbye. That night, alone in her small apartment, she stared at the ceiling and felt the truth settle in her bones. He had not vanished. He had been sealed off. By assistance. By status. By a world that did not consider her worth answering. Silence had become a decision. The magazine confirmed what her heart already knew. She saw it during her break, abandoned on a table in the staff room. Glossy pages. Perfect smiles. Headlines celebrating wealth and unions made of legacy rather than love. There he was. Immaculate. Controlled. Arm around a woman whose elegance matched his public life. The caption spoke of an upcoming wedding, of families united, of power secured. She folded the magazine slowly, her hands shaking. The room felt too small. The walls too close. She ran to the bathroom and was sick. At first she blamed the stress. The lack of sleep. The heartbreak that made breathing feel optional. But when the dizziness didn't stop, when her body felt unfamiliar, fragile, she went to the hospital alone. The nurse's question was gentle. Is there a chance you could be pregnant? The test answered before she could speak. Positive. She sat on the edge of the examination bed, staring at the paper like it belonged to someone else's life. A child. His child. A life formed during a week the world pretended never happened. She laughed once, hollow and broken. Of course, she whispered. Of course. She tried to contact him one last time. This time there was no pretense of politeness. His company rejected her email. His office blocked her number. The hotel informed her that instructions had been given. She was not to disturb him again. That was when humiliation turned into clarity. She understood her place in his world perfectly. She resigned from the hotel the same day. No farewell. No explanation. She packed what little she owned into 2 suitcases and boarded a bus heading south, chasing anonymity and survival. Starting over was brutal. Pregnancy did not soften the world. It made it sharper, harder, less forgiving. She cleaned houses, took deliveries, worked nights, saved every coin, ate little, slept less. But something changed inside her. She was no longer invisible for survival. She was invisible by choice. She stopped waiting, stopped hoping, stopped measuring her worth by who had walked away. When her daughter was born, tiny, fierce, perfect, she felt something rise in her chest that she had never known before. Purpose. Holding that child, she made a vow that no one else would ever hear. "I will not disappear," she whispered. "Not for anyone." Years passed. She studied at night, worked during the day, learned systems, numbers, logistics, leadership. She learned how power really functioned, not through money but through competence and consistency. By the time fate decided to circle back, she was no longer the woman he had left behind. She was something else entirely. The woman he never expected to meet again. Time did not heal her. It forged her. The years after her daughter's birth were not gentle, inspirational montages the world liked to romanticize. They were long, exhausting, and painfully ordinary. Nights of studying while a baby slept beside her. Mornings of rushing to work with dark circles under her eyes. Days where doubt crept in and whispered that she was aiming too high, dreaming too loudly for someone who had started with nothing. But every time that voice returned, she remembered the silence. The unanswered calls. The blocked messages. The way power had closed its doors without explanation. And she pushed forward. Slowly, steadily, she rebuilt herself, not as a reaction to him but as a promise to herself and her child. By the time her daughter turned 2, she had transformed from a quiet assistant into a strategist. She understood systems. She anticipated problems before they existed. She spoke less, listened more, and when she did speak, people leaned in. Respect followed competence. Her employer noticed. Clients noticed. Opportunities found her without being asked. And somewhere far away, a man who once believed the world bent at his command was discovering that control did not equal peace. Marriage did not save him. It hollowed him. From the outside his life was flawless. Magazine covers. Charity galas. International expansions. A marriage praised as a union of legacy and power. Inside the house, silence lived in every room. They were civil, polite, distant. 2 people bound by contracts, not affection. At night, he lay awake replaying memories he tried to forget. The warmth of a woman who had seen him without expectation, the way laughter had come easily when nothing was being negotiated. He searched for her longer than he admitted to anyone. Private investigators. Old records. Dead ends. She had erased herself perfectly. It was almost admirable. Almost devastating. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. A proposal presentation. A logistics firm shortlisted for a major partnership. He skimmed the details absently until one line stopped him cold. Project lead. Her name. For a moment he thought it was coincidence. A common name. A trick of the mind. Then he saw the attached profile photo. The room tilted. She looked different. Not transformed by wealth or glamour but by confidence. Her eyes were sharper. Her posture unyielding. The softness he remembered was still there but it had boundaries now. Armor. He stared at the screen longer than he should have. "Schedule the meeting," he said quietly. She knew the moment she saw the company name. Fate had a cruel sense of timing. Her employer spoke excitedly about the opportunity, about the scale of the contract, about how this could change the company's future. She nodded, smiled, took notes. Inside she steadied herself. She had spent years preparing for moments like this. Not this man but this level of confrontation. Power rooms. High-stakes decisions. People who underestimated quietly and dismissed politely. She would not be small again. Not for him. Not for anyone. The conference room was everything she remembered from his world. Blast. Steel. Quiet authority. He entered mid-conversation, commanding the space without raising his voice. Executives adjusted. Assistants fell silent. Then he saw her. The air changed. He stopped walking. She stood at the far end of the table, tablet in hand, dressed professionally, no hint of the woman he had known in secret. She looked at him calmly like he was just another stakeholder. For the first time in years he felt unprepared. Their eyes met. Recognition hit him like impact. Her expression did not change. "Good morning," she said evenly. "Shall we begin?" The meeting continued as if nothing monumental had just occurred. She spoke with precision, led with data, answered challenges before they were asked, every number backed by logic, every strategy airtight. He barely heard the others. He watched her command the room. The power dynamic had shifted completely. She was not asking for approval. She was offering value. And value had always been the only language he truly respected. When the presentation ended, silence lingered. "This is impressive," one executive said. He nodded slowly, eyes never leaving her. "It is." She closed her tablet. "We'll forward the full proposal by end of day." She turned to leave. "Stay," he said before he could stop himself. The word echoed louder than he intended. She paused, then faced him fully. "Is there a business question, sir?" "Sir." The distance in that single word hurt more than anger ever could. "I believe there are things we should discuss," he said carefully. "There are," she agreed. "But not here." She walked out without waiting for his response. He sat back slowly, pulse racing. She hadn't disappeared. She had evolved. And for the first time, he realized the silence he had left behind had not destroyed her. It had sharpened her into someone he now had to earn the right to face. That evening, she stood in the hotel bathroom looking at her reflection. She saw the girl she had been once. She saw the woman she was now. And she knew one truth with certainty. This time she would not be the one waiting. When power finally changed hands, the second meeting was not scheduled by coincidence. It was deliberate. He had insisted, quietly, firmly, that negotiations continue only if she led them personally. His board questioned the request. His assistants hesitated. But no one argued for long. When he wanted something, the world had learned to rearrange itself. She knew what that insistence meant. And she accepted anyway. Not because she needed the contract. Her proposal was already strong enough to win on merit, but because some confrontations could not be avoided forever. The private conference room overlooked the city, sunlight reflecting off glass towers that had once symbolized everything she did not belong to. Now she stood at the head of the table, composed, prepared, untouchable. He entered last. This time he did not speak first. He studied her openly, as if memorizing a language he had once been fluent in and somehow forgotten. There was guilt in his eyes, regret, and something dangerously close to hope. She did not acknowledge it. She began with numbers. "Based on projected growth, our firm can reduce your European logistics costs by 17% within the first year," she said evenly. "Operational risks would be mitigated through decentralized routing and redundancy planning." He listened, really listened, because this time he had no choice. When the presentation ended, the board excused themselves one by one, leaving the two of them alone. The door closed. Silence filled the room. He broke it first. "You're extraordinary," he said softly. She folded her tablet. "That's not relevant." "It is to me." "That," she replied calmly, "is no longer my concern." He inhaled slowly. "I never stopped looking for you." She met his gaze at last. Her eyes were steady, unreadable. "That's interesting. Because when I was trying to reach you, your entire world made it very clear I didn't exist." Pain flickered across his face. "My team filtered those calls. They thought they were protecting me. And you let them," she said. "Not accusing. Just stating fact." "Yes," he admitted. "And it was the greatest mistake of my life." She stood, walked to the window. The city stretched below them, ambition, success, consequence. "You don't get to confess and feel absolved," she said quietly. "You disappeared when it mattered. I didn't have the luxury of explanations." He stepped closer. "Tell me what happened." She turned slowly. For the first time she allowed him to see it. Not anger, not bitterness, but strength built from surviving alone. "I built a life," she said. "Brick by brick. Without you. Without answers. And I won't allow that life to be shaken because you finally found your courage." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm getting divorced." Her expression did not change. "That doesn't erase the past," she said. "No," he agreed. "But I need you to know I'm not hiding anymore." She studied him for a long moment. "Some truths don't come with forgiveness," she said. "They come with consequences." He deserved that. The contract was approved the following week. Unanimously. Her firm celebrated. Her employer praised her publicly. Industry circles took notice of her name, her precision, her authority. And quietly, in boardrooms and executive meetings, something else happened. People started to see her. Not as an assistant. Not as a background presence. But as power. Meanwhile, his carefully constructed life unraveled. The divorce became public. Headlines followed. Questions surfaced. Whispers turned into scrutiny. The image of control he had maintained for decades cracked. For the first time he faced the same thing she once had. Judgment without explanation. Silence without comfort. And he understood, finally, what that did to a person. The confrontation came unexpectedly. She was leaving the office late one evening when she found him waiting outside. No entourage. No driver. Just him. "I won't chase you," he said before she could speak. "But there's something you deserve to know." She crossed her arms. "Make it quick." "There's a child," he said carefully. "Isn't there?" Her breath caught. The truth had risen on its own. She did not deny it. "Yes," she said. "There is." His face paled. "She's mine," he whispered. "Yes." "How old?" She hesitated only a second. "Old enough to know who stayed." The word struck deeper than any accusation. He nodded slowly, tears threatening but not falling. "May I meet her?" She looked at him, not as a lover, not as a memory, but as a man standing at the edge of accountability. "That," she said, "depends on what kind of man you choose to be now." For the first time in his life, power did not grant him access. Respect did. And respect had to be earned. The price of silence, the reward of truth. He did not sleep that night. For the first time since he had inherited an empire, numbers meant nothing. Contracts blurred. Emails went unread. His mind stayed anchored to a single sentence that echoed over and over again in his chest. Old enough to know who stayed. He had built companies that employed thousands, shaped markets, bent outcomes through strategy and money, but he had failed at the one thing that required no power at all. Being present. Meanwhile, in a small apartment filled with quiet warmth, she sat beside her daughter's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of a tiny chest. The child slept clutching a worn stuffed animal, peaceful, unaware that the world had shifted again. She brushed a curl from her daughter's forehead and felt the familiar surge of resolve. Nothing would ever come before this. Not love. Not guilt. Not a man who arrived late with regret in his hands. He waited. Days passed without pressure, without messages, without appearances. No assistants reached out. No lawyers interfered. No headlines followed. He respected the boundary. That alone surprised her. Then one evening a letter arrived. Not an email. Not a call. A letter. It was short. Simple. Written by hand. "I'm not asking to be forgiven. I am asking to be accountable. If you allow it, I will show up, consistently, quietly, on your terms. If you don't, I will accept that consequence without resistance." There was no signature flourish. No title. Just his name. She folded the letter slowly. That night she did not cry. She thought. The first meeting happened in a park. Neutral ground. Open space. Daylight. Her daughter played on the swings while he stood several steps back, hands clasped tightly in front of him like a man afraid to move too fast. She watched him watch the child. He didn't interrupt. Didn't approach. Didn't try to charm. When the little girl laughed, he smiled, but held himself still. After 20 minutes, her daughter ran toward her, breathless. "Mama," she said happily, "that man looks sad." Her heart tightened. She crouched. Some people are learning how to be brave. The child considered this, then nodded solemnly and ran back to the swings. He swallowed hard. "She's extraordinary," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. "She is." He looked at her. "I won't fail her." She met his eyes. "You already did once." "I know," he said. "That's why I won't ask for shortcuts." That was the moment something shifted, not forgiveness but possibility. The truth came out eventually. Not through scandal. Not through gossip. Through integrity. He acknowledged the past publicly, not naming her, not exploiting the story, but admitting to emotional abandonment, to cowardice masked as responsibility. Boards reacted. Investors hesitated. And then something unexpected happened. Respect grew. Not for perfection, but for accountability. He stepped down from positions he no longer deserved. Restructured leadership. Put systems in place so no one else could disappear behind him the way she once had. Power, when confronted honestly, transformed. Years earlier, she had been invisible in rooms like these. Now she stood at podiums as a leader. Her firm expanded internationally. Her name carried weight. Her opinions shaped policy. She was no longer defined by what had been taken from her, but by what she had built. And still, every morning she packed lunches, braided hair, kissed scraped knees, read bedtime stories. That was her greatest success. Their relationship rebuilt itself slowly, not as a romance at first, as trust, as consistency, as presence. He attended school events without press, showed up when it wasn't convenient, listened more than he spoke, accepted correction, apologized without defense. Her daughter learned his name, then his laugh, then his arms. And one evening, as they sat together watching the sun dip below the horizon, her daughter spoke the truth only children can. He stayed, she said simply. She closed her eyes. Yes, he had. Love returned quietly, without desperation, without fantasy, built on humility. And one night, years after the week that changed everything, she looked at him across the table and understood something profound. The man before her was not the man she had loved once. He was better. Because he had paid the price of silence, and learned its cost.